First, let's hear from our liberty-loving panel. Cato Institute economist Dan Mitchell, the managing editor of Reason magazine, Catherine Mangu Ward, and the creator of the Libertarian Republic news site, Austin Petersen. So, Austin, were you more impressed than the audience?
More bored. You know, when you look at the speech, the president was very duplicitous. He brought up a lot of things like health care and energy and the economy. The president wants to take credit for all the good things that happen, but he doesn't want any of the credit for the bad things that happen. You know, this is the guy that has had the food stamp rolls increased 45% since he took office. But you don't hear him talking about that, or that the home ownership is lowest in the 20 years. So he just wants to talk about all the flowery, nice things. But how come he doesn't talk about that stuff? And can I just mention one thing about the stimulus plan? The president promised that we were going to have 4% GDP growth year after year. We had half of that, and he likes to take credit for the stimulus. But, of course, the stimulus ended in 2011. All of the economic growth has occurred after the stimulus. But what have we gotten since the economic recovery began? We had sequestration. That's the word that nobody likes to talk about.
Which was supposed to be horrible and kill the...
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And, in fact, that's exactly what Obama loves to go after Republicans for, because they're cynical, they didn't cooperate, they didn't work together, they're not doing it right. You know, I think, though, when you say Republicans froze spending, it sounds, even though you're not glamorizing it, you're still making it sound better than it is. I mean, they froze spending almost accidentally. They froze it because they were kind of just being jerks.
Well, also, you had spending shoot up so much in 2009 because of the corrupt TARP bailout and the fake stimulus. So,
right. I mean, it's horrible to say Obama is right. The Republicans were being obstructionist and just kind of a pain in the butt. Generally, it is a happy accident.
But and let's not forget that the GDP is socialist because it includes government spending as portion of growth, and we all know that that's BS.
The deficit is another thing that the president brags about. I have reduced the deficit by 2/3. But again, that's because in his first year there was $800 billion in stimulus spending.
We've had federal spending as a share of GDP. It could go below 20% in 2015. That's down from 23.4%. That's actually a really steep drop. So when we're
still $488 billion deficit.
True.
But the key thing to realize is that the deficit fell because of policies Obama opposed. The debt limit fights, the government shutdowns, and sequestration.
They say, look how much oil we're producing at home now. But again, the president opposed much of that.
He didn't sign the Keystone XL pipeline. He said in his first State of the Union address in 2009, we need to start looking at getting energy independence. We need to get off of oil from Saudi Arabia. And yet he could have done it, but he didn't.
On public lands, there's been hardly any increase. All the increases on private lands, mostly from fracking, which his people oppose. We are back with our studio audience and our liberty-loving panel. Economist Dan Mitchell, Reason Magazine's Catherine Mangu Ward, and Austin Petersen, creator of the Libertarian Republic website. Here, it's reporting on the free college plan, which the website says flunks the Republican test. Meaning what?
Well, from the man who promised you free health care comes free college, right? You know, students spend more on books than they do on classes. These are giveaways to colleges, not to students, and then they just use this to turn around and raise the rates.
I agree. Sometimes I think the president doesn't listen to himself even. He said he wants more workplace rules. He complained that America is...
We are the only advanced country on earth that doesn't guarantee paid sick leave.
It's probably true as far as I know. But then just 2 pages later in his speech, he said this.
America has put more people back to work than Europe, Japan, and all advanced economies combined.
So he doesn't get the connection?
I assume that his speechwriters are giggling in a basement someplace, that they pulled one over on the president because he didn't realize that he was contradicting himself. Yeah, we are doing better than Europe because we don't have as much government intervention as Europe. And that's why our job creation numbers are better. I mean, look at the double-digit unemployment rates. Look at the 40 to 50% youth unemployment rates throughout Europe. Here's a news flash. When government passes rules to make it more expensive to hire someone, guess what happens? fewer people get hired. I realize that makes me heartless.
Because they call it the Healthy Families Act. You're against healthy families.
Yeah, I guess it's totally heartless.
Against workplace flexibility, which is the other term that's clearly been tested to death. And what they use for this...
It's employer inflexibility.
And it's actually the exact opposite. What they're saying is, you know, there's been far too much flexibility here. We're going to have to clamp down on that right now. New rules from the feds for everybody.
You know, they always make the joke, they're always like, libertarians, if you don't like government, well, why don't you just move to Somalia? But then I just say, well, if you love government, why don't you move to North Korea?
All right, let's venture into something that TV programs fear to approach, net neutrality, which the president briefly talked about. In this case, we're getting no great message from Republicans either. I noticed Senator John Thune and Representative Fred Upton have a bill. They want to they like that broadband providers remain neutral. We all like neutrality. That sounds good. This bill would prohibit them from blocking websites. We don't want them blocking websites. It would also prohibit them from charging companies for faster delivery.
Yeah, we got a problem, John. There is an army of communist nerds on the internet who are pushing net neutrality. And these are people who either don't understand the laws of supply and demand, or they just want to push it away, like President Obama does. The thing with internet neutrality is if Netflix is, you know, if most people are on Netflix and it's 60% of all traffic is Netflix, well, of course you should have to pay more. And then you pass the cost on to the consumer. One of the things we've always got to be careful of, too, is the never let a crisis go to waste crowd, because every time a terror threat happens or whenever there's a cyber attack or something, politicians always move in and say, well, let's go ahead and pass net neutrality. That will help with cybersecurity.
Didn't you hear though?
I've ordered every federal agency to eliminate rules that don't make sense.
Austin?
In his first term, he added 106 new federal regulations, and we're still tallying them up for the second term. You know, the president in his...
We have a graph that shows the number that it's increased. It always goes up.
It always goes up, you know, and in 2009, the president also said, well, we need to get rid of regulations that force health care costs to go up. So we got Obamacare, and I went from paying $96 a month for my premium to $396 a month for my premium. So how is that helping health care costs go down?
You know, you're the most powerful man in the free world. You could probably close a prison.
Well, it's not like FDR putting Japanese in internment camps quite so much, but what we have seen is that the people who have been released from Guantanamo Bay have been captured on the battlefield again. So we're not even administering justice properly because the president is endangering our national security by having this prison there.
Administering justice properly would be bringing them to American prisons and giving them American due process.
Right. All we're administering that justice.
When they do polls on small businesses, the number one problem that small businesses report isn't that they need more sales. That's the second biggest problem. The number one problem are all the regulations that they have to follow, all of the red tape. So if Obama really cared about middle-class economics, he would get rid of some of these regulations that harm small businesses.
And yet, talking about Keystone, let's set our sights higher than a single oil pipeline. Pass infrastructure that would create more than 30 times as many jobs.
The president likes to talk about how we need to cut back on pollution and we need to have affordable energy. But what he doesn't understand is that the trains that are being used right now to transport oil from Canada through the United States create more pollution than the pipeline that would be built. And we have dozens of these pipelines. Why can't we build one more?
I said some nice things about Republicans earlier. It's time for me to rectify that. A lot of Republicans in Washington are now proposing to do a gas tax to fund more Washington centralized highway spending and mass transit spending and pork barrel projects. We shouldn't have a Department of Transportation in Washington at all. And these Republicans, having just won a landslide election promising to be anti-big government, for them to say the American people should pay higher gas taxes, that's outrageous.
Wait, so who would build the roads? Without government, who would build the roads?
State governments and private people. But wouldn't you rather have a carbon tax than the income tax?